Methylene Blue has taken the internet by storm, and one idea is that it can act as a smart drug. It can improve your mind, your memory, and your learning. And in fact, Methylene Blue can access the brain, and in lab animals like rats or mice, it seems to be able to boost memory. But does this actually pan out in humans? In 2014, a team of scientists suggested that Methylene Blue could in fact enhance memory. They were treating claustrophobic people with fear of tight spaces. And what they do is they expose them to their fear, kind of face your own fears. So they ask these people to go inside a wooden box, a tight wooden box, basically a coffin, for 5 minutes, and then come out and then go back in and do a number of these exposures to try to desensitize, to try to reduce the level of fear. And throughout, they asked them to rate their fear so they kind of have a real-time sense of their fear level. I know this sounds terrifying, sounds like a terrible idea. Even to me, I'm not claustrophobic, and it sounds terrifying, but it does seem to work in some people, not everybody. Right after they put the participants through this protocol, they gave half of them Methylene Blue, 260 milligrams that they took over a span of 24 hours following the treatment. And the other half was basically a control group. They took capsules that looked the same but contained a blue dye. No Methylene Blue. 1 month after this whole session, they came back to the center and tried it again. Went back into the box and rated their level of fear. They made a fascinating observation. In those folks for whom the sessions worked, basically at the end of the first day of those exposures of 5 minutes, they were rating their fear as pretty low. A month later, the folks who received the Methylene Blue had a lower level of fear than the ones who didn't. But in those that didn't do well during the session, where by the end of that exposure, that first day, they were still rating their fear as very high, those who received Methylene Blue reported higher levels of fear a month later than those that received the placebo. This didn't reach statistical significance, but there was a trend. The scientists basically suggested that Methylene Blue was strengthening their emotional memory of the experience. If the experience of the sessions was good, then they do better on Methylene Blue. But if the experience was bad, a lot of fear, then Methylene Blue is worse than placebo, worse than doing nothing. Now, one criticism is that maybe this isn't really a test of memory. They're not asking them to remember anything, any facts or any numbers. It's testing their fear levels. So it's more like emotional memory. It's not really a cognitive ability thing. So in that same trial, the scientists also threw in another test, a more direct test of their memory. Inside the box, they placed some numbers that the participants could see. The numbers were glow in the dark. So the participants were lying in there and could see those numbers during the exposure. I know this all sounds like a horror movie, but that was the experiment. And the scientists didn't say anything about the numbers previously, didn't warn them that there were going to be numbers, didn't mention them. But when they came out of the box, then they asked them about the numbers inside. I guess you could say it's a test of their thinking outside the box. Basically, 1 day after the whole ordeal, there was no significant difference between the folks who received the Methylene Blue and those who didn't in terms of how they remembered the numbers. It was about the same. But a month later, when they came back, the folks who got the Methylene Blue remembered the numbers significantly better than those that received the placebo. So a really interesting observation. Now, it was a small trial, but it's a randomized, placebo-controlled small trial suggesting an effect of Methylene Blue on memory, at least in this very specific stressful situation. 2 years later, another study from a different team of scientists looked at this question again, Methylene Blue and memory. They put their participants who didn't have any condition, they weren't trying to treat anything, so healthy, normal participants, they put them through some attention and memory tasks, and they gave half of them Methylene Blue and the other half a placebo, a blue dye as well. The folks who got the Methylene Blue showed increased brain activity in areas of the brain that are involved in attention and emotion. So that was interesting, but can they actually perform better? So they put them through 2 cognitive tests. The first was an attention and reflexes test. So they're staring at a blank screen, and as soon as they see a cross, they're supposed to click. So they're tested for their speed of reaction. And the second test was a short-term memory test. Basically, they're shown a pattern of colored pixels for 4 seconds, then they're shown a blank screen for 6 seconds, and then they're shown 2 options, and they're asked to pick the one that they saw previously. So they did a bunch of each, a bunch of the see the cross and click, and then a bunch of the see different patterns and recognize them. So that whole thing was the baseline session to get like baseline values, baseline performance. Then they were split randomly and half received methylene blue, the other half received the placebo. And the methylene blue was 280 milligrams of an oral tablet. And then they repeated the two tests. So basically they have a measure of performance before and after receiving the methylene blue or the placebo. So basically here are the results. The attention and reflexes test, no significant difference. So the methylene blue didn't seem to improve that task, but in the short-term memory, they did get a result. Basically, it looked like this. The line with the squares is the placebo, so performance before and performance after getting the tablet. And then the line with the triangles is the methylene blue, before and after getting the tablet with methylene blue in this case. So this increase on methylene blue was significant. Just comparing before versus after methylene blue, performance went from about 80% accuracy up to 87%. Although when they compare the two lines, so comparing the change on methylene blue to the change on placebo, that didn't quite reach statistical significance. Now, why did their memory, short-term memory, improve in this test, but not the box test? If you remember the claustrophobic participants with the numbers, short-term memory didn't seem to improve there. Not quite clear what's different. Maybe it has to do with this memory to a stressful, emotional stimulus as opposed to here, which is just a straight cognitive test, maybe. Or it's the time frame, right? In the other case, it was 24 hours later. Here it's seconds later, completely different time frames. But really interesting observation. Again, same limitations. It's a small trial. 13 participants got the methylene blue, so very small trial, but again, randomized with a placebo, suggesting an effect on memory. It's an interesting finding. Okay, when we're talking about supplements or drugs or really anything, we always have to talk about risk-benefit. So what are the risks? What are the possible side effects? The most common ones are urinary and GI, gastrointestinal side effects. So peeing a lot or sensation of burning when peeing, and also GI symptoms like nausea or diarrhea. Most of these were mild and transient, so it wasn't severe, wasn't a huge deal. Another thing to mention is when you take methylene blue, the urine turns blue and the feces sometimes turn blue as well. It might freak out some people. Another thing that's very important for people who are on serotonergic medication, like Prozac, these antidepressants that are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, SSRIs, you don't want to combine methylene blue with that. They can interact and they can cause something called the serotonin syndrome, which is more serious, can have more devastating symptoms, including in some extreme cases, death. So caution with that. For someone who decides to try methylene blue, definitely make sure you're not on serotonergic medication. Other side effects that are more serious, less common but more serious, include headaches, confusion, vomiting, chest pain, trouble breathing, high blood pressure, and some blood issues like destruction of red blood cells. These are more common at high doses of methylene blue. And also caution is warranted during pregnancy, breastfeeding, and for young children. Another thing is something called glucose 6-phosphate dehydrogenase deficiency. It's kind of a mouthful, but people who have this condition, they don't do well at all on methylene blue. They can have pretty devastating symptoms. So definitely don't go near that stuff if you have this specific condition. But kind of a general problem with supplements is they're very loosely regulated, barely regulated in the US at least. And so it's sometimes a big question mark how much of the supplement is actually in there as opposed to what it says on the box, and contaminants. What else is in the product? So if you decide to try methylene blue, consider pharmaceutical grade, purified methylene blue. That's a lot safer contaminant-wise. Third-party certified is another option if there's a brand out there that has been tested by another company that's unaffiliated with the company selling and has confirmed the dose and the purity. In general, favoring lower doses if you get the effects you're looking for is always better than going for higher doses because the contaminants are going to be also lower. Personally, I don't take methylene blue. The evidence that I've seen so far isn't compelling enough to justify it, but you may have a different evaluation. So now you have the data, you can make your own informed decision. For more on supplements, including supplements for longevity, for lifespan extension, we have a whole video going over that. Check it out right here. And what about improving our brain health with diet? Check out this video right here with all the information. I'll see you in there. Bye-bye.